Close your eyes for a moment. Picture Britain in the 1970s, the smell of leaded petrol, Saturday morning drives, the hum of a familiar engine that felt like part of the family. Those cars weren't just transport, they were life. But somewhere between the decades and the scrapyards, most of them simply vanished. Today on Britain Rewind, we're bringing 10 of them back, cars that filled our streets, our driveways, and our memories, before quietly disappearing forever. Trust me, you'll want to stay until the very end, because number 1 deserved so much better than it got. Now let's begin our countdown. Number 10, the Hillman Avenger. If you were alive in the early 1970s, chances are you saw one of these parked on almost every residential street in Britain. The Hillman Avenger arrived in 1970, and it felt like exactly what families needed: practical, affordable, and surprisingly well built for its price point. It came in saloon and estate forms, and for a time, it genuinely competed with the Ford Cortina for everyday family loyalty. But here's the part most people forget: the Avenger was actually well received by the motoring press at launch. Road testers praised its handling and ride comfort, which wasn't something you often heard about budget British saloons of that era. So why did it vanish so quietly from public memory? The answer lies in a corporate identity crisis that eventually swallowed the Hillman brand. And the next car suffered a very similar fate. Number 9, the Vauxhall Viva HC. Ask yourself this: how many times have you heard someone mention the Vauxhall Viva in the past 10 years? Probably not once. Yet throughout the early to mid-1970s, the Viva HC was genuinely everywhere. It was Vauxhall's answer to the everyman car, entry-level, easy to run, and marketed heavily at younger drivers and working families across Britain. It even spawned the sporty Forenza coupe variant, which carried far more attitude than anyone expected from a budget saloon. But here's where things get interesting: despite selling in enormous numbers, the Viva HC left almost no cultural footprint whatsoever. No legends, no real fan clubs, barely a mention in any automotive conversation today. It quietly made way for the Chevette in 1975, and the world simply moved on. Did your family ever own one? Because the next car was even more overlooked. Number 8, the Austin Maxi. Here's one that genuinely makes you wonder what could have been. The Austin Maxi arrived in 1969 and ran well into the 1970s, giving Britain one of its first proper 5-door hatchbacks. Think about that for a moment. Genuinely ahead of its time. 5 doors, a fold-flat rear seat, decent boot space, and a roomy interior that family buyers should have loved. But what happened next is rarely talked about. British Leyland completely fumbled the launch and the marketing. The gear change was widely criticised, interior quality felt cheap, and the Maxi developed a reputation for unreliability it never quite escaped. It should have been a landmark British car. Instead, it became a punchline. The bones were genuinely good, but the execution let it down badly. Does that sound familiar? Stay with us, the next car tells an even stranger story. Number 7, the Triumph Toledo. Now here's a name that even dedicated enthusiasts sometimes struggle to place. The Triumph Toledo was launched in 1970, slotting into the lower end of the Triumph range and targeting buyers who wanted that prestigious badge without the premium price. It was a perfectly decent car, rear-wheel drive when rivals were going front-wheel, a smooth 4-cylinder engine, and that unmistakably classy Triumph interior that made you feel a cut above the usual crowd. But here's the part that's most interesting: it sold reasonably well throughout its production run, yet left almost no mark on automotive culture. No famous owners, no iconic moments, nothing memorable attached to its name. It simply existed, served its purpose, and disappeared when the Dolomite took over in 1976. Or is this your first time hearing about it? Number 6, the Woolsley 6. If the Woolsley brand means anything to you, it probably conjures images of police cars and stately older gentlemen. And that image, funnily enough, is exactly what killed it. The Woolsley 6 was introduced in 1972, built on the same platform as the Austin 1800 and sharing mechanicals with several other British Leyland products. It was genuinely well appointed inside: leather seating, a proper walnut dashboard, and that distinctive illuminated grille that glowed proudly in the dark. But here's the painful irony: the buyers Woolsley needed were aging out, and younger customers wanted nothing to do with a brand that felt like it belonged to their grandparents. Sales dwindled, and by 1975 the entire Woolsley name was retired forever. A proud British automotive badge, simply erased from history. The next car on our list had an equally bittersweet and surprising ending. Number 5. The Hillman Hunter. Most people completely forgot this car existed, which is remarkable when you consider how many were on British roads throughout the 1970s. The Hillman Hunter was part of the Roots Arrow family, a practical, no-nonsense saloon that kept Britain moving throughout the decade. But here's the twist that nobody talks about: a Hunter actually won the 1968 London to Sydney Marathon Rally. A family saloon. Won one of the most grueling long-distance motorsport events of its era. And yet that achievement was almost entirely forgotten as the years went on. The Hunter quietly soldiered on until 1979, by which point the Chrysler rebadging era had stripped away whatever identity the Hillman name once held. It deserved far more recognition than it ever received. But trust me, the next entry on our list carries an even more surprising and unexpected legacy. Number 4. The Bond Bug. And now for something completely different. Not every forgotten British car of the 1970s was a sensible family saloon, and the Bond Bug proves that spectacularly. Launched in 1970 by Bond Cars of Preston, this bright orange three-wheeled wedge was unlike anything else on British roads. It seated two, had a canopy that lifted rather than doors that opened, and looked like something from a science fiction television program. It was quirky, impractical, and genuinely brilliant. And this is where things get interesting. It found a small but fiercely devoted audience, mostly young drivers attracted by its personality and low price. Production ended in 1974, and only around 2,270 were ever built. Today, surviving examples are genuinely cherished. But in the broader public memory, the Bond Bug has almost vanished completely. The next car disappeared despite being far more conventional. Number 3. The Austin 1800 Land Crab. Here's one that earned its nickname honestly. The Austin 1800, affectionately known as the Land Crab for its wide, low, crab-like stance, was one of the most technically advanced family cars Britain produced. Designed by Alec Isigonis, the genius behind the Mini, it offered extraordinary interior space for its exterior footprint, front-wheel drive, and a hydroelastic suspension system that was genuinely ahead of the competition. And what happened next is rarely talked about. Despite receiving the European Car of the Year award in 1965 and continuing strong into the 1970s, the Land Crab was simply never loved the way it deserved. Its ungainly appearance put buyers off who couldn't see past the styling. It should have been a British engineering triumph. Instead, it faded quietly. Do you remember seeing these on British roads? Because number 2 is going to hit quite differently. Number 2, the Rover P63 500S. Now we're getting serious. The Rover P6 was one of the most sophisticated cars Britain produced throughout the 1970s, a genuine rival to European executive saloons, built to a standard that earned it the first ever European Car of the Year title back in 1964. The 3500S variant, with its manual gearbox and BIC-derived V8 engine, was aimed squarely at drivers who wanted performance with their prestige. It was fast, beautifully built, and genuinely rewarding to drive. But here's the part most people forget: it was replaced in 1977 by the Rover SD1, and almost overnight, the P6 was simply forgotten. No comeback, no revival, no cult following. Today, very few survive in genuinely good condition. And that story of quiet disappearance despite genuine greatness brings us perfectly to number 1. And trust me, this one deserved so much better. Number 1, the Triumph Dolomite Sprint. Nothing on this list breaks the heart quite like this one. The Triumph Dolomite Sprint, launched in 1973, was powered by a 16-valve engine at a time when that technology in a production saloon was almost unheard of. This was cutting-edge British engineering. It produced 127 horsepower, making it quick, And it looked the part too, subtle, stylish, and unmistakably purposeful. Road testers loved it. Enthusiasts adored it. It even took class victory at the 1975 British Touring Car Championship, proving it could compete with dedicated competition machinery. And then British Leyland fell apart. The industrial chaos of the late 1970s meant the Sprint never received the development it deserved, never got the investment it needed, and quietly died in 1980 without fanfare. A revolutionary British car, forgotten in the noise of corporate collapse. It deserved better. So much better. And there you have it, 10 cars that once filled Britain's streets with noise, character, and life, now almost erased from public memory. But they weren't just machines. They were moments. Family holidays, first drives, rainy Sunday mornings, the smell of a warm engine on a winter day. These cars were Britain. And every one of them deserves to be remembered. So tell me in the comments, which one did you grow up around? Or which surprised you most? If this brought back memories, hype this video, give us a like and subscribe to Britain Rewind. We'll see you in the next amazing video.